Alien Romulus is one of my personal favorite movies of the year, and despite some of the controversy, I think it's one of the best entries in the Alien franchise. In every interview about this movie I've seen, Fede Alvarez and the rest of the cast and crew talk about bringing the series back to its horror roots, and they definitely delivered on that front. Fede's writing and directing for Romulus showcases his extensive talent and experience in horror. One of the main reasons this movie works so well is that it really nails the fundamentals. The first time I watched the original Alien, I thought it was a bit slow. It took a while to get going. But when I rewatched it later on, I realized how important it was that it took its time setting the stage and establishing the premise. When things start going wrong in the Nostromo, it packs such a punch because of how grounded everything has been leading up to that point. The ship needing repairs after landing, the journey into the alien ship to investigate the radio signal, the methodical protocols of the crew trying to decide the best course of action. All these details make it that much more shocking when an alien bursts out of Kane and no one knows how to react. It's almost unimaginable in the context of the story. Romulus sets things up in a similar way. We're shown the miserable and hopeless life the main characters are trapped in, and it takes the time to properly introduce the characters, their struggles, motives, strengths, and weaknesses. Most importantly, it allows us time for us to settle into their perspective. And that's just one of the fundamentals. The rest are really strong too. The premise makes sense and is interesting, the plot is constantly escalating, the set pieces are really fun, the characters are relatable, and most of them are likable. Even the decision to have just six main characters is significant because having such a small cast allows us to have more time with each character, and it builds more tension than having a bunch of randoms die, one after the other, which is a pretty common pitfall for horror movies. Rain and Andy especially stick out as a couple of my absolute favorite characters in the whole series. Rain's actions speak louder than her words, and she seems almost unstoppable because fighting for survival is all she's ever done. She really is the driving force of the anti-mega corporation themes for this movie. Andy absolutely steals the spotlight. His quirks and mannerisms are so well acted out. And when he switches personalities, it's actually really sad. I couldn't wait for them to get the chip out so he could be his old self. The extra layer of losing someone you thought you could trust when you need them the most is great writing, and it really worked on me. Aside from that, Andy's character brought a lot of wholesome moments. I really loved his and Rain's sibling dynamic, which is such a unique concept. They constantly risk their lives to protect each other, so it doesn't even matter if Andy isn't human, the sacrifices they make for each other are real. The rest of the cast does a great job as well. Isabella Merced needs to be inducted into the Scream Queen Hall of Fame immediately, and Archie Renault had a lot of well acted scenes. Plus, he really helped to balance out the characters. Although the main things I like to talk about are the story, themes, and characters, I can't even talk about Romulus without mentioning how great it looks and sounds. In the interviews I've seen, Fede talks about the lengths they went to get some of the exact same sounds from the original movie, which is really a great touch. He also reunited a lot of the special effects crew from the first movie to work on the animatronics and costumes. That's something I really appreciate is just how real it looks, because it actually is. It's real sets with mostly real actors and real special effects, and you can feel the difference. Their approach was to have as much done in camera as possible and use CGI to enhance and embellish what was already there. Romulus is a great example of a perfect balance between the two mediums. When the workload is split between practical and digital effects, the end result is much better than relying on one or the other. I also love when we get to see behind the scenes shots leading up to the release. It makes it more exciting because we never really know whether we're looking at an animatronic or a costume or a digital rig or what. By far, one of the most mind blowing shots for me was the first xenomorph emerging from the cocoon. When I saw it in the theater, I thought for sure I was looking at mostly CGI, but sure enough, later I saw behind the scenes clip of that shot, and it was mostly done in camera. Same thing with the offspring at the end. If you've seen anything about this movie on social media, you've probably seen the clip of Kaylee Spaney standing next to Robert Bobrovsky in full alien costume, which looks like it shouldn't even be real. Not only was their approach to actually creating the scenes well thought out, the scenes themselves are all great ideas too. The acid blood slowly dripping down on Bjorn was absolutely gruesome, and the idea to have the X-ray light actually showing the chest burster breaking Navarro's ribs was genius. Even the final battle with the offspring was built around the ship design, and it's so much fun to watch despite how nightmare-inducing it is. On top of all of this, Alien Romulus is also standing on over 40 years of alien design, stories, and concepts to spring off of. There's a lot of borrowed ideas and some form of nod or callback to just about every movie that came before. which is a good thing in some ways, but also one of the main things I've heard people dislike about this movie. In my opinion, the only callback that bugs me is the android that looks like Rook. Partly because the deepfake CGI is horrendous and it's unsettling that it's just Ian Holmes' likeness, not the actual actor since he passed away. It was just unnecessary and kind of shoehorned in, but for me it really didn't detract from the experience at all. The other complaint I've seen tossed around is the callback lines, the most egregious being Andy's when he kills a xenomorph to save Rain. Again, kind of shoehorned in and unnecessary, but not really enough to detract from the experience, for me at least. I've also heard some people say Romulus almost seems like a fan film, not just because of the cringy callbacks, but also because it's a simpler concept compared to the rest of the series, especially Prometheus and Covenant. But, in my opinion, I would much rather have a simple concept executed really well than something high concept executed not as well. There was originally going to be another prequel in the same vein as Prometheus and Covenant, but since Covenant didn't do very well in the box office, it was cancelled. It made the most sense to make something closer to the originals. The first Alien movie is not just the best in the series, but also one of the best sci fi horror movies of all time, and it has a very simple premise at its core. The reason Alien is such a special movie is because the right combination of creative powerhouses came together and just ran with it. The end result is a movie that's truly unique. It's an inspiration and influence for so many movies that came after it. It works on every level as a slasher, horror, sci fi, even drama. Every layer has simple ideas and common themes that tie it together. I think that's the main reason the rest of the franchise has struggled to find its footing, because it's such a difficult balance to take something so unique and try to move it in a new direction. Most of the time, you only end up with a piece or two of what made the first movie work so well, and the rest just doesn't fit. That's why Alien Romulus is so impressive. It doesn't reinvent the core concept or change the direction. It takes the core concept, tells a new story, and adds enough new themes and ideas that work together to make it unique in its own right. Not to mention that it manages to pretty seamlessly include a lot of different elements from a very convoluted franchise, which I'm sure wasn't easy. Alien Romulus isn't something entirely new, it's a cherry on top of something we already love, which most of the time is what a good sequel should be.